Starling Marte, Mark Canha, and Brandon Nimmo. That is your 2022 outfield, folks. We know it already, and it's not even December. Starling Marte was the number one free agent. I wanted the Mets to go after this offseason, and I cannot believe they got him. I'm fired up. Let's talk about it all on this special episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, we have a lot to talk about, but this is a special edition of Locked On Mets. This is a Saturday morning recording. You just have to talk about Starling Marte signing with this team. This isn't the podcast where you dive deep into the numbers because you know what? I've done that all off season. You can find a bunch of different Starling Marte episodes linked in the description below on YouTube or on your podcast feed. Just scroll through, find Starling Marte. I've been talking about this signing since the beginning of the offseason. This was the one signing I identified above everything else that I wanted the Mets to make. So we're sitting here on a Saturday morning simply to celebrate a job well done by Billy Eppler. We're not going to focus on the fact that all three free agents are 32 years old. We're not going to worry about anything bad that can happen. This is a day to celebrate because the Mets have a starting outfield of Mark Canha, Starling Marte, and Brandon Nimmo. That is the best outfield they've put together since probably 2015 when Curtis Granderson, Michael Conforto, and Yoenis Cespedes were the outfield that the Mets used throughout the playoffs and into the World Series. So we're going to cover all of this throughout the show today. But before we get to any of that, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com, where I will have a piece that's going to go up today on Saturday as well. That's some of my best work. I'm not even going to front here. I were an emotional piece late last night talking about this signing and the way that the Mets should be processing this signing, because this is a significant day for the New York Mets to have landed Mark Canha and Starling Marte to replace Michael Conforto. That is great work by Billy Eppler. And I want to, in a bit, dive into Billy Eppler's process for building out this team. He did foreshadow this in his introductory press conference. But before we get into that, I just want to take a minute to, quite honestly, take my victory lap. Okay? In podcasting, you miss a lot of times when you're doing a daily show on the New York Mets or any team. You can identify some free agents you want them to go after, and it doesn't always happen. Starling Marte always made sense for the New York Mets because he made sense for every single team this offseason. Starling Marte, this is not a guy who just, decided to take a deal with the Mets. Starling Marte wanted to play for the Mets. You can't tell me that there was no other team in baseball that would have given Starling Marte a $78 million contract over 4 years to play center field for them. Starling Marte had widespread interest. There's a lot of teams that were in on this guy. And sure, the Mets might have got him by adding that fourth year earlier than any of those other teams did, but they convinced him to play for the New York Mets. Billy Eppler, one way or another, as a communicator, got Starling Marte to sign on the dotted line, and that is a great job by him. A huge first big move for Billy Eppler. You get a free agent that can come in right now and be a star player for you. Starling Marte might not always have 5 tools across the 4-year span of this contract, but right now, he has 5 tools. He has the ability to hit for power. He has the speed, stole over 20 bases in each league at a time where people aren't even stealing 20 bases in a full season. Did it in the AL and the NL this year. He has a great arm out in the outfield. He can still play center field, hits for contact, gets on base. This guy is legit. And you could find in the description of the episode below a entire episode where I broke down how much I would have been comfortable with the Mets signing Starling Marte to, which was, I believe, a 5-year, $110 million deal. And you get him for you get him for 78 over 4. I'm still trying to sort it out in my head. I'm so excited about this signing for the Mets. That is a great value contract. And yes, there's some risk here with the way the Mets just built out their team. They just signed Marte and Mark Canha, both of them coming off their age 32 season. Eduardo Escobar, same thing. But the net result of their outfield right now is Mark Canha gets on base a ton, can play defense. Brandon Nimmo gets on base a ton, can play defense. Starling Marte gets on base a ton, can play defense. This is the best Mets outfield, and I don't know how long. I'm still sorting through it. We're going to get to more of it in just a minute because I want to talk about Billy Eppler's process for building out this team. This is exactly what he said he was going to do in his introductory press conference, and I'll tell you how that foreshadows what the Mets will continue to do throughout this offseason in just a minute. BetOnline is back and better than ever, now featuring a new web interface for the start of the basketball season with more props, odds, and lines available than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. You can head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using our promo code LOCKEDON. From basketball to football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. So Billy Eppler has only been on the job as the Mets GM for about a week. He was introduced last Friday, and then a week later, at the end of Black Friday, he goes on this big shopping spree, really just diving into that 32-year-old bin, getting Mark Canha, Eduardo Escobar, and then finally Starling Marte. It was a great night for the New York Mets. And Billy Eppler foreshadowed these events in his introductory press conference. I talked about it in my 5 key takeaways. This is a GM that experienced a very similar situation when he ran the Angels, two franchises that are very akin to one another, right? You have teams with bloated payrolls, with contracts like Albert Pujols for the Angels, for the Mets, Robinson Cano. You have farm systems that are weak that have been traded from for years as the teams try to win now. And you're trying to find the best way to build up this franchise organically. And you don't want to go back to that trade route to enhance the current roster and take away from future World Series odds, as Billy Eppler described. So what he said was, dating back to his time with the Angels, the strategy was to build up a quick winner through free agency, signing players to short-term deals that don't hamstring the franchise too much going forward as you try to build out depth in the farm system and really build your ball club the right way. So the Mets are not going to be signing free agents this offseason with qualifying offers attached. They're not going to be giving up different prospects and trades to try to fix the roster now. Instead, it's going to be short-term deals, and that's exactly what they did. Mark Canha and Eduardo Escobar, who I talked about when I thought that was all the Mets are going to do in a podcast last night, those were moves to get 2 starting-level players on 2-year deals. And what that means for the Mets is if they aren't good after year 1, you're very flexible to get them off your books. But if they're great, good value for the Mets on these deals. And then you have Starling Marte, who does get 4 years, but that is a top-tier free agent that you're willing to give 4 years. Even if that 4th year doesn't pan out great for the Mets, you are expecting great success in the next 2 years with Marte, and that is what you're paying for. Those back 2 years, you'll worry about it later. I did an entire show comparing the Curtis Granderson signing back in 2014 to what this Starling Marte signing could mean for the Mets now, because it's very parallel free agencies between Marte and Granderson. Players that were center fielders. Marte can still play center a little bit better than Granderson could at that time, but really good athletes that should age very well. Granderson was the perfect fit for that team from 2014 through 2017. He came to the Mets. He was a leader. He set an example. He didn't have the best first year, but in his second year, he basically paid off that entire contract, being the best player on a Mets team that went to the World Series. Literally led the Mets in F4 that year. Curtis Granderson was the best player on a team that won a pennant. That is what the Mets got the last time they signed a free agent about this age to a 4-year contract. I'm not saying Starling Marte is going to lead the Mets in F4 and the Mets are going to go to the World Series. It could happen, but really, if this team's at its best, it's going to be Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor that are your main star players. And think about how many RBIs Pete Alonso is going to have this year when you have Mark Canha, Starling Marte, Brandon Nimmo, and Francisco Lindor all getting on base at a 360 plus clip for you in that lineup. Alonso should have a field day. He should drive in 130 runs this year. But getting back to Starling Marte and comparing it to Curtis Granderson, Granderson was the perfect fit then. He helped the Mets make the playoffs in 2 straight years. The last time the Mets had 3 outfielders in their lineup at once, because the Mets have forever been trying to trot out infielders in the outfield. It goes back to Daniel Murphy and Lucas Duda, to the most recent iteration of Dominic Smith and JD Davis in the outfield. They have tried to get bats in their lineup by using left field as a carousel of terrible defenders, and now you don't have that. For the first time since that World Series team in 2015, you actually have 3 outfielders playing out there, and Yoenis Cespedes was not a center fielder, but had to be one that season when the Mets went to the World Series. Now, it doesn't even matter how you line it up. I really don't care. Starling Marte can be your center fielder. Brandon Nimmo can be your center fielder. You can have Canha in right. You can have Marte in right. You can have Nimmo in right. They can do whatever they want. They have 3 legitimate outfielders that can run down fly balls in the gaps. That is going to change the dynamics of the Mets team. Right now, their outfield is set. And then you look at the Eduardo Escobar signing, and right now, it's just a decent move. He's your starting third baseman, but it could be an even better move, because the Mark Canha signing alone, as you can, again, watch the podcast I did, it was exciting when I was talking about Canha and Escobar, but then Mark Canha becomes the second outfielder that you acquire because Marte is clearly the number 1 guy, and suddenly the Canha signing pops more because you're like, wait a minute, that's not the Michael Conforto replacement. No, that's the left field replacement. That's replacing whatever was going on out there last year, whether it was Jeff McNeil or Dominic Smith. Now it's Mark Canha. And so that makes that addition even better. And Eduardo Escobar can pop even more if the Mets sign Javi Baez. Suddenly, that signing looks even better and pops more because it wasn't the biggest addition to your infield. It's the second biggest addition. And the Mets apparently are still interested in Javi Baez. So you look at all of it, and the New York Mets in one night have set themselves up with the team that just makes a ton of sense. I want to dive into the roster construction, where they're at right now, and what else they can still do this offseason in just a minute. I love the holiday season with all the good food and treats, and dessert is always the best part of this time of year. But maybe you want a dessert that's just not so full of calories and sugar, which is why it's the perfect time for Built Bars. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie is upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end, where a Built Bar is only 130 calories with only 4 grams of sugar, packed with plenty of protein. You can replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, or go for a raspberry Built Bar instead of that raspberry pie. There's lots of good flavors to replace any pie. Built Bars come low in calories, low in carb, low in fat, but they're high in protein, high in fiber, and come covered in 100% chocolate. There's going to be new surprises all month with limited time flavors arriving at built.com. So check the site often. Go to built.com right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. By signing Eduardo Escobar, Mark Canha, and Starling Marte, Billy Eppler just added 2,097 career games and 11,524 career plate appearances to his starting lineup. That is adding great experience and veteran leadership, something the Mets might have lacked last season. You want to talk about Eduardo Escobar and what he brings to the Mets? He is a slight upgrade over Jonathan Villar when it comes to production on the field. a little more power, maybe a little bit more of a consistent hitter throughout his career, but he brings a clubhouse presence that is completely different from Jonathan VR, at least based on reputation. VR had the reputation of being a clubhouse cancer in some previous stops. Maybe it wasn't that way for the Mets, but that was how he was perceived previously. Eduardo Escobar, beloved around the game. I don't know if this was the end all be all reason that Starling Marte signed with the Mets, but what I will say is as you're deciding between a couple of spots, the Mets end up signing Escobar. Escobar can give you a call suddenly to play with Eduardo Escobar and a team that you were already considering. That could be the thing that might have tipped the scale a bit. And that makes that contract to Escobar worth it because, yes, it's a little bit of an overpay. His last contract, he got a 3-year, $21 million deal. Now, 3 years later, 3 years older, he gets $20 million over 2. Great deal for Escobar, but you know what? If it played even the slightest role in Marte's signing, great deal with the Mets. And even if not, the leadership he's going to bring, the experience of that starting lineup, this Mets team already looks pretty legit on paper. If you played a game tomorrow, you could go Brandon Nimmo in left field, Starling Marte in center, Francisco Lindor at short, Pete Alonso at cleanup, playing first base, of course, Mark Canha batting fifth, playing right field, Jeff McNeil playing second base, batting sixth, Eduardo Escobar as your seventh hitter, playing third, and James McCann as your catcher with Jacob deGrom on the mound. If it comes to the DH position, you have Robinson Cano still, you have JD Davis, Dominic Smith. They have all these different pieces they can move around. If they end up signing Javi Baez, Jeff McNeil's now a bench player. That is what the Mets did overnight. That is how they changed their starting lineup, turning a third of it over, adding 3 starters. This is huge for the New York Mets. They still have a lot to do. This team is not done shopping. The pitching has to be addressed. You're potentially going to lose Marcus Stroman. Seems like he might be on his way out the door. Who are you going to sign in his place? Is it going to be Kevin Gausman? Are you going to now, with a revamped roster, suddenly call up Max Scherzer and maybe he takes the phone call looking at the team you've built? It's possible. I'm not saying it's likely, but it's certainly more possible than it was 24 hours ago. The Mets now have a team that is even more attractive to other free agents. It's even more attractive to Javi Baez to come back and play with his buddy Francisco Lindor when he knows the outfield behind them is going to be great. And when you add Eduardo Escobar, who is a guy that, again, is beloved around the game that other guys want to play with. These are all great signs for the New York Mets moving forward. You just changed the dynamic of your ball club. And yes, it is still early. Yes, these are old free agents. But what the Mets basically did is they hit the reset button. They're now going to take a couple of cracks at this with an aging team and a bloated payroll. And what you're hoping for is the other things you're doing behind the scenes, the way you're building up your farm system, but the way you're building up your scouting, your analytics, that eventually in 3 years, you won't need a $300 million payroll to compete. And you'll have a winner that's a lot more sustainable. But you know what the Mets just did? They added Mark Canha and Starling Marte to replace Michael Conforto, and they still get that draft pick. They're getting a draft pick for Noah Syndergaard. I'm sure they would have much preferred him to have signed that qualifying offer and been in their starting rotation. But as long as they address those needs with other free agents, hey, at least you got the pick. The Mets are going to have a critical draft this year with a ton of selections, getting comp picks for Kumar Rocker, Michael Conforto, and Noah Syndergaard, plus their own first-round pick that's pretty high as well. They're going to have a chance to build that farm system the right way now. And if they don't make any big trades from that farm and they continue to address their needs through free agency, that farm system is only going to get stronger and stronger. And you know what? When it comes to Escobar at third base, that is also the one position where the Mets have a lot of up-and-coming talent going through their farm system. Mark Vientos is a player that is very close. The bat, I believe, is ready. The glove may not be. Who knows, though? We might see him this season. Brett Beatty could be the starting third baseman next year. Eduardo Escobar 2-year deal does not stop any of that. All of this is to say that I am obviously in love with these moves by Billy Eppler because the Mets have shaken the narrative that there is no free agents that would want to sign with them, that no one wants to be a Met. Well, now that's out of the window. Now you have a team where you got free agents that wanted to play for you. You have a roster that's starting to make sense, and you can continue to attack the rest of your offseason, which feels like it's only a week remaining on being able to build out your roster. There are players who are jumping at contracts with the CBA set to expire, and you have to be aggressive right now or you're going to miss out on talent. The Mets are not going to go home with nothing when the CBA expires and we get to a shutdown. They have already made moves that are significantly going to impact their ball club next season. That's going to be all for this episode of Locked On Mets. Who knows when Billy Eppler is going to force me to hit this mic and record again, because it seems like he is ready to keep on making moves. But anyway, as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q and handicapping expert Lee Sterling. Locked On Bets is the place to go for your daily gambling needs. You can find Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.